Welcome back. This one's going to be a bit different because throughout the month, I keep the list of everything I've been watching on my phone, and halfway through this month, my phone broke, so I lost the list. So this is less everything I watched in March and more everything I can remember watching in March, or almost everything I watched in March. Because I don't remember the order I watched everything in. Normally I do it pretty much in chronological order, but this time I'm going to do two categories. I'm going to start with all the new stuff, like stuff that's just come out and also stuff sort of within the past year, and then move on to the older stuff. And that way, if you're only interested in watching new stuff, you don't have to bother watching to the end. Alright, let's go. Dune Part 2. This is unequivocally the movie of the month, and I went to see it a couple of times. And I already covered everything I loved about it and a couple of issues I maybe had with it in my review, so I won't go over all that again. But what a movie, what a finale, or, a second half. Where part 1 kind of put the ball on the tee and let us have a look around the golf course, and then part 2 comes in and smacks the ball off the tee and gets a hole in one. I don't know why I'm using this analogy, I don't know golf, but it was pretty amazing. Great battle scenes, very spectacular battle scenes, and, but it's not just spectacle, there's deeper themes at play, and it's digging into ideas of religion and politics and society and the stories we tell and the impact they can have. It's just an epic in the truest sense. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. This is on the other end of the spectrum, where Dune 2 was the movie of the month. This was the disappointment of the month. I was so underwhelmed by it, and I'd loved Afterlife. I loved all the new characters that brought to the table, Phoebe and Gary, and it was a very exciting prospect that they're gonna team up with the OG Ghostbusters, and New York's gonna be frozen over. It's gonna be this huge spectacle, and it was such a letdown. I mean, they freeze over the whole city, and then it's all confined to a garage. In the first one, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man comes to life as this huge kaiju taking over the streets of New York. Even in Ghostbusters 2, considered generally to be the worst one, the big finale is the Statue of Liberty comes to life, and this is they're in the firehouse the whole fucking time. But anyway, this is another one. I did a whole review of it, so I don't need to keep going over it. But it was a bitter disappointment. Drive Away Dolls. This one I really enjoyed. This one I had a lot of fun with. I just thought it was really funny. It had that classic Coen Brothers quirk, or Coen brother, because it's just one of them. It's interesting to see what each one brings to the table, because with Joel Coen's solo stuff, it seems like, okay, he's the one bringing the existentialist stuff to the table. And then with Drive Away Dolls, it's like, okay, so Ethan is the guy who brings the zany humor. And this one is just all zany humor. I thought it was fun. It was a great cast. I mean, Margaret Qualley and, I'm going to pronounce this horribly wrong, so I apologize, Geraldine Viswanathan as the two leads were hilarious, and they had a great back and forth where, one is really outspoken and outgoing and confident, and the other one's very insecure and introverted, and that's a classic dynamic, but they pulled it off really well in this, and Beanie Feldstein is funny as always, and Coleman Domingo was great, and Matt Damon has a really great cameo. I thought it was fun, and it's like 80 minutes, it flies by. Bob Marley, One Love. This one got a lot of negative reviews, so I didn't really know what to expect going into it. I ended up really enjoying it. I thought it was really well done. It was, as a character study. And it's, it's one of those musician biopics where, because the family's involved, they can only really flirt with his dark side. They're not gonna really show his dark side. There's gonna be a slight suggestion that maybe he wasn't 100% perfect, and then they're gonna brush over that quickly. But Kingsley Ben-Adir, I thought that was a fantastic performance. It was, particularly with Bob Marley's stage presence. He has this very unique kind of style of, I don't even know how you would describe it, but it's kind of like a shimmy side-to-side dance move that it's really easy to do badly, and it's really hard to do it accurately. But he did it perfectly. You'd think you were watching Bob Marley. You'd think you were watching real concert footage. And Lashana Lynch completely stole the show as Rita Marley. She was fantastic. She shows up in 3 or 4 scenes and runs away with the whole film. I thought it was really good. And I knew a couple of Bob Marley songs going into it, but I've been listening to his stuff more after seeing the film, and it's great. Curb Enthusiasm Season 12, Curb's final season, still going on. We're very almost to the end now, which I find so sad, because it's been my favorite show forever, and that's about to be over. But it's been a hell of a last hurrah, this final season. There's been so many funny bits in it, so many great, it's been great to see. There's a bit of a melancholic quality to watching Richard Lewis's scenes. But I'm so glad that he was, in this season so much before he passed away, and he has so many funny moments in it. And there's been so many, relatable bits in it, like the idea of getting stuck on an annoying text chain where everyone's putting in these really generic, sympathetic messages, and you can't get out of it, but you're getting bothered by it every 2 seconds. And the idea of when you're in a doctor's office being paranoid that people on the other side of the wall can hear you, because that's a weirdly specific but completely universal thing, that those walls in those doctor's offices are weirdly thin, and you probably can hear what's going on the other side of them. It's just amazing that, like, in season 12, almost 25 years into the show's run, it's still jam-packed with so many good bits. Spaceman. This is the movie where Adam Sandler's in space and encounters like a giant spider. And it's basically like the spider's basically his therapist. He's there to listen to his problems and help him come to conclusions by himself and figure out what he needs to do and what he wants to do. And I would have preferred if they had left it a bit more abstract and a bit more unexplained, because so much of the movie is taken up explaining exactly where the spider came from, exactly how he got on board the ship and what happened to his planet and why he wants to help Adam Sandler. Whereas I think if they'd left it more abstract and a bit more ambiguous as to whether or not it's all in his head, I think it would have made the movie a lot deeper. Having said that, though, I did love Paul Dano's voice performance. His voice was like weirdly perfect for this like sympathetic therapy spider. And I love Adam Sandler. I love the understated, dramatic Adam Sandler that you see in movies like Punch Drunk Love and The Meyerowitz Stories and Hustle. And so I just love seeing him in that style. So I enjoyed the movie overall. Roadhouse 2024, the Roadhouse remake on Amazon Prime. Which is, you know, exactly what you expect. It's as ridiculous and goofy as the original. It's as far-fetched as the original. And it's also as much fun as the original. You know, what are you expecting? It's a bouncer. It's a notorious bouncer known across the whole of America. You know, taking out the trash and beating up the rabble-rousers. And it's stupid, but, you know, what do you expect? It's Roadhouse. And I also was quite surprised that, you know, Conor McGregor's a pretty good actor. I mean, he's basically himself. He's playing, or you know, not necessarily himself, but his public persona, the guy who antagonizes everyone and wants to get in everyone's head and fuck with people. But, you know, there are plenty of great actors who stay in one lane and you know, very much play close to who they are and can still do great work. And that's kind of what he did in Roadhouse. He's, you know, if you didn't know who Conor McGregor was and that was just a guy who's doing his first performance in a movie, you wouldn't think that's his debut performance. You'd think that guy's been in 20 other action movies and he knows the drill by now. Because he was, you know, there used to be a ton of memorable action movie villains. You'd have like Hans Gruber and the guy in Air Force One and all these villains that you could really like get to know. Whereas now there's so many generic bad guys in action movies, it's rare that you remember a villain. But in Roadhouse, Conor McGregor's Knox is a memorable villain. All of Us Strangers. I missed this when it was in cinemas, although I'd really wanted to watch it and it looked really great, and came on Disney Plus. So I watched it and it's delightful. It's heartbreaking, it's really sad, but it's really great. It's really well made and really well acted, and it's a really touching story where, you know, the premise is Andrew Scott is his parents died in a car crash when he was like 12. And he's never fully processed it and let them go and moved on. And then he one day just sort of spontaneously decides he's going to go back to his childhood home. And there he finds his parents just living there. And they're, you know, the same age they were when they died. So now they're basically his age. But they still talk to him like he's a kid. And really beautifully acted. I mean, Andrew Scott was great. And Jamie Bell and I think Claire Foy were the parents. They were great too. And the director, Andrew Haig, or Haig, I don't know how you pronounce it, but the director who also wrote it, I think based on the novel, it's, you know, you can tell a great writer from someone who takes a premise like that, like a juicy premise, high concept premise, like guy reconnects with his dead parents, and looks at it and thinks, what's the most interesting scenes I can get from this premise? And there's a whole scene where Andrew Scott is sitting with his mom, and he comes out to her, and it's, you know, it's not like a typical coming out scene because it's in this context where he's now an adult and he's been openly gay for a long time, but he never got a chance to tell his parents because he was only 12 when they died. And so it's just this totally unique situation that could only possibly happen in this story. And it's, you know, the way she's from like a different time, she's from decades ago, and society obviously has changed a lot since then, and he's trying to explain that to her, that society is a lot more accepting now. And it was just really, really beautifully written and beautifully acted. And Paul Mescal was great in it as well as Andrew Scott's neighbor, who they strike up a bit of a romance as he's reconnecting with his parents. And that was another case of Andrew Haig taking his unique premise and thinking, what's the most fascinating fascinating, compelling, dramatic scene I can come up with, and it's this is spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it, and I recommend avoiding spoilers if you haven't seen it, because it's so impactful if you haven't. But when Paul Mescal, when Andrew Scott goes into Paul Mescal's flat and finds him dead in his bedroom, and he realizes, oh, I've been imagining him as well. And then he speaks to Paul Mescal's spirit, who is the one he's been seeing, and Paul Mescal has this really powerful monologue where he's saying, like, why didn't anyone find me? And that's the kind of scene that only this movie could have, where it's a dead guy. It's so heartbreaking. He's wondering, why didn't anyone find my body? Why do people care that little about me that I can die and no one even knows? It was just a really phenomenal film. Next Goal Wins. This isn't a fantastic film. This is pretty naff, actually, but it's Taika Waititi's movie about the American Samoa football team, famously like the worst football team in the world, and they'd never won a game, or I think they'd scored like 1 goal ever, or maybe there was even 0 goals, I can't remember. But Michael Fassbender plays this Dutch coach who was brought in, but although he plays him as an Irishman, he is brought in to get the team into shape, and it kind of is like this anti-Ted Lasso, where in Ted Lasso, the optimistic coach comes in to inspire the cynical players. But in this, the players are the ones who are optimistic, naively optimistic, and the coach who comes in is very cynical, and they have to melt his icy heart. And it's all very, very formulaic sports movie stuff. And I haven't seen the documentary it was based on, but I had to write a thing months ago when it came out about the true story, so I did do a bit of research on it. And it seems to me that this documentary was this unique story that is unlike any other kind of sports story you've ever heard. But in adapting it into a Hollywood movie, Taika Waititi has kind of like ironed out all the idiosyncrasies of all the uniqueness to make just a bland, motivational sports movie about the underdogs. And it's, it's all right. There's a whole scene where Michael Fassbender opens up about why he's so cynical and why he's so closed off to the world. And that was actually really beautiful and really moving. But that's one great scene in a generally not so great movie. And at the beginning of it, Taika Waititi starts to narrate it. And I was like, fuck me, are you doing this again? Are you doing this again? You just did Thor Love and Thunder, where you plaster yourself in every scene, and if you're not on screen, you're doing the voiceover, and it's like, are you really about to do this again? But luckily, the narration didn't carry on. He introduces the location and everything in the story, and then it just sort of takes off on its own. But it was not that great. X-Men 97. I've been really enjoying this. It's amazing to me that they've been able to recreate the animation style of the 90s series so perfectly. Because I love that show. I love the 90s X-Men animated series. And it plays like you could watch the original series from beginning to end and then carry on with this new one, and it would feel totally seamless. You wouldn't be like, oh, there's been a 20-year gap there. It looks and feels exactly the same way the original series did. And not just the aesthetic as well, because it kind of, like the original series, it takes the characters seriously, and it's more about the characters on an intimate, personal scale than these huge worldwide conflicts they're fighting. And it's very melodramatic, but in a very sincere way that's very endearing. I've been really enjoying it. I think it's one of my favorite Disney Plus shows to come out of the MCU. Cat Person. This came out a few months ago. It just dropped on Netflix in the UK, and I have mixed feelings about it, because I didn't hate it. I thought I would, because when it came out, there was all these articles about how stupid it was, the changes they made to the original story to try and make it, a big screen movie experience. And so I'd actually gone onto Wikipedia and read the plot summary to see what the changes were. So I'd spoiled it for myself going in, and the ending is really dumb. So I had already built up in my head, oh, this movie's gonna suck, and then I didn't watch it. But then it came on Netflix, and I thought, you know what, I'll give it a try. And maybe going in with low expectations will help. And it did. The stuff I didn't enjoy, I knew I wasn't going to enjoy. And then the stuff I did enjoy was a nice surprise. I still don't get, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, it's not like the Nicholas Braun character comes in and he's this really suave, charismatic, charming guy that any woman would fall for. He, comes off as a creep instantly. And he's not. Every attempt he makes at, a flirtation or a joke just falls completely flat, and it's just awkward. And I don't get why this woman would fall for him in the first place. But as long as she does, and they're texting and they're meeting up and stuff, you're gonna have to just accept that. That's what the story is. And it does do a great job of highlighting you know, all the scary gray areas in modern dating, and it does do a good job of highlighting the terror of being a young woman who has agreed to meet up alone with this guy you barely know, who for all you know could be a serial killer. And how, but on the other side of that coin, you know, everyone wants companionship, no one wants to be alone, so you have to take that risk. But it's, you know, for me as a man, my risk is I might get my heart broken. But for this young woman, Margot, going out with this Nicholas Braun character, it could be she doesn't come home. It could be, you know, it's a bigger risk is what I'm trying to say. And the movie highlights that, and I did think that the director, who I want to say his name is Susanna Fogel. Let me just double check that. Yeah, Susanna Fogel. She had this sort of recurring visual motif where, as Margot's going out with this guy Robert, she has these like flashes of what could happen, and you see all these different scenarios she's imagining where she could be getting murdered or kidnapped or anything. And it was really powerful to visualize that and to see this is something that could happen, this is something she's worried could happen. And so I was kind of going along with it, and there was a couple of bits I found really funny, like when they're having sex, she's talking to like a second version of herself who's standing over there by the bed, and is just talking about how awkward and terrible the sex is, and her other self is trying to tell her, like, just tell him you don't like this so we can end it, and she's like, no, it'd be easier just get it over with, and she's having this interesting back and forth in her head. But then it gets into its third act, and it makes these big Hollywood changes to the story, and it's just gets ridiculous, and it loses sight of the themes it's trying to play with in the first place. So, you know, I'm not even sure whether to say I liked it or not. But, you know, it was an interesting watch, so maybe just, I don't know, watch it and see it for yourself. Damsel. This was awful. This was really a letdown. I didn't expect much from it, but it just seemed, I don't know, it seems to be that Netflix originals, not like Netflix original, you know, what my favorite Netflix original movies are the tiny little $100,000 movies they pick up on the festival circuit. But I mean the big tent poles that Netflix sort of generates from within, like Red Notice, or The Gray Man, shit like that. You know, they always have this very bland aesthetic. They always look like made-for-TV movies, because that's basically what they are. But they cost $200 million, so they look like really, really expensive made-for-TV movies. But this one, Damsel, didn't even look like an expensive made-for-TV movie. This thing could be on the Sci-Fi Channel, and you'd be like, this is one of their worst efforts. It's got such a grim, grey look, which is partly because Millie Bobby Brown spends half the movie in a cave, and it wants to be this empowering, subversive fairy tale that flips the damsel in distress trope on its head and empowers women, and it really isn't that at all. It's just really bad. And the most depressing thing about these awful Netflix originals that look like shitty, disposable, made-for-TV movies is that they've got great actors. You know, Millie Bobby Brown's a great fucking actor, and Angela Bassett is in this fucking thing, and Robin Wright. They've got these incredible actors, you know, with like the shittiest material. You know, it's heartbreaking to watch. I mean, it always blows to watch a bad movie with bad writing, but it's especially heartbreaking when they've got this incredible, a screen legend like Angela Bassett doing the best they can with this fucking awful material. But yeah, Damsel, I don't even recommend, you know, to stick on in the background. It's just awful. Ricky Stanicky. This one I actually liked a lot more than I thought I would, because I thought the premise was really dumb, that there's these guys who have made up this fake friend so they can get away from their wives, so they can, if they want to go to a concert or something, they can say, oh, Ricky's in the hospital, he needs us to be there for him. And then the wives want to meet Ricky, so they hire this washed up, has-been actor, played by John Cena, to play Ricky. I just thought, you know, that's gonna suck. And then the reviews came out and said it does suck. I was like, yeah, I thought so. But for some reason I still decided to watch it. And I actually really enjoyed it. It wasn't like hilarious, and it wasn't like a fantastic movie, and it was very predictable, and you can see where it's going probably half an hour into it. But it was entertaining. It was an enjoyable watch. There's some funny parts in it. John Cena. I love seeing John Cena in comedic roles. He seems to be completely free with like letting himself be silly. He'll do a comedic thing and doesn't mind if he looks ridiculous because he's committed to the bit. And so I actually enjoyed Ricky Stanicky a lot more than I thought I would. Femme. This was an incredible fucking movie. It was sort of like a modern noir, dealing with these themes of homophobia and like repressed sexuality, and it's about this drag queen who gets into a bit of an altercation with these guys who are making homophobic remarks in like an off license. And then the drag queen's on his way back to the bar where he's just nipped out to get some cigarettes or something, and these guys are following him, and then when he's on like a dark street corner, they just attack, and it's a brutal fucking attack. And then like some time passes, and he's still like, as happens with anyone when they're a victim of a horrible violent crime, he's developed kind of agoraphobia, and he's scared to go out and doesn't want to leave the house and just wants to stay in, and his friends are encouraging him, no, you've got to go out. So he goes out to one of these bathhouses and sees the guy who attacked him is there. He's played by George McKay from 1917. He was incredible in this, and he's there, but he's still making homophobic remarks to everyone, even though he's at a bathhouse specifically for gay men. I mean, the movie leans really hard into the idea that the most homophobic people are gay, and then our lead character Jules, played brilliantly by Nathan Stewart Jarrett. Kind of strikes up a conversation with him, and he doesn't recognize him, and they're talking, and then he ends up like going home with him, and they're in bed together, and they strike up a bit of a relationship. But he's like really, really serious. George McKay's character is really serious about like, don't let any of my friends see you here, or they're gonna get ideas, So then Jules sort of hatches this plan of, one of these times we're having sex, I'm gonna secretly film you, and then I'm gonna post it online, and I'm gonna out you publicly. And so it just kind of plays out as this nail-biting thriller. And I thought it was amazing. Like, I was on the edge of my seat the whole fucking time. And the performances were absolutely incredible. And it was just really, really powerful stuff. I mean, it should come with a trigger warning, because the bigotry and the violence is completely uncompromising. And, is really, really difficult and uncomfortable to watch. But it's all in service of this really powerful, really impactful story. It was a great film. Girls 5 Ever. This just came to Netflix. I think it was originally on Peacock, and then I'm assuming it got cancelled at Peacock after 2 seasons, and then the 3rd season is now on Netflix, with the first 2, at least in the UK. I don't know about anywhere else. It's hilarious. I fucking loved this show. It's kind of about like a 90s Spice Girls style 90s girl group, who are now like all in their 40s, and one of their songs gets sampled by like a rapper, and then it brings this renewed interest in them, so they try and stage like a comeback and get back together. And it's just a really, a fucking hilarious cast with Busy Phillips is in it, and Paul LaPelle is in it, and just this, it's one of those casts. Everyone's hilarious, everyone's great, and there's no dead weight, and where there are no favorite characters, because just everyone's your favorite character. And it has this, I think it's like Tina Fey's an executive producer, I think a couple of writers and producers from 30 Rock are involved, and you can really tell there's like definitely a stylistically a connective tissue where it's got this same sense of like ridiculous absurdism, but there's also like a really sharp satire going on as well. And there's so much satirical stuff to mine in this premise of like the media's treatment of middle-aged women, and it's really funny, and it's a really breezy watch because there's only like 8 half-hour episodes per season, and I think 6 in the new one. So you can pretty much watch the whole series in a weekend. But it's so funny. American Fiction. I rewatched American Fiction after Claude Jefferson won the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay, completely deservingly, because it's a fantastic script. And I loved it just as much the second time. It's so great, and Jeffrey Wright is great, and well, all the actors are great, but Jeffrey Wright as the lead as the anchor of the movie. And it's one of those great movies where the comedy lands and it's really funny, and there's a lot of laughs, but also the dramatic elements land and the emotions hit. Really terrific stuff. Reality. This was really interesting. It was Sydney Sweeney stars in it, plays the title character. Reality Winner, which is a strange name. Sounds like how you would describe someone who like won Jeopardy. But she got in some trouble with the FBI because there was suspicions. I think she'd leaked some sensitive documents to like one of those news places where they leak government documents. And obviously the government don't want their shit being leaked. And the whole movie is just the FBI agents. She comes home from work, the FBI agents are waiting at her house, and they're searching the place and they're interviewing her. And I think the whole script was adapted from the real life tapes of the real life interviews. Brought to life by these actors. And Sydney Sweeney was fucking phenomenal in it. I mean, as always, but it was, to play. At first, she thinks, I've done nothing wrong. They're just going through the channels and all the procedures they have to do. I'll answer their questions and they'll get out of here. And then as it starts to go on, she starts to realize they know more than they're letting on. And she's in a lot more trouble than she thinks. The fear starts to come through, and like the worry, and she played that so perfectly. Priscilla. I rewatched Priscilla, came on Mubi, And I really loved it when I watched it in the cinema. I think it might be my favorite Sofia Coppola film. And then rewatching it now has only kind of confirmed that, because I think it's a really great kind of character study, and it's a very well-rounded, very three-dimensional portrait, where it doesn't just show Priscilla to be this helpless victim, and it doesn't show Elvis to be this monstrous abuser. It shows them to be two people who fell in love and had a very tumultuous, very complex relationship. And she was just a kid, and he was slipping into drug addiction, and it all culminates in that ending, which I won't spoil, but is so beautiful and so perfect as a full stop on this tale of Elvis and Priscilla's relationship. And Kaylee Spaney and Jacob Elordi are fantastic. Kaylee Spaney, kind of draws you into Priscilla's perspective and tells you exactly who Priscilla is without doing too much. She can convey so much without even saying a word. And with Jacob Elordi, he's not doing an impression of Elvis, but it's also kind of a spot-on impression of Elvis. It's not an impression like an Elvis impersonator would do in Vegas. It's like he's playing offstage Elvis. He's playing Elvis the guy, and he's fantastic. Alright, so that's all the newer stuff I've watched. I'll dive into the older stuff I've been watching this month. Rushmore. This is one of my favorite Wes Anderson films. Certainly one of the funniest Wes Anderson films. And I rewatched it because I was making notes because I'm doing a video on it. So I won't talk too much about it here because I'll spoil the video. But I feel like this was the first true Wes Anderson film, because Bottle Rocket is great, but it's very low-key, very plays a bit more like a regular movie and less like a Wes Anderson movie. But with Rushmore, it starts to, the symmetry and the bright colors and everything start to seep in. But it's still as accessible as Bottle Rocket. I think it still works just like as a straightforward standard, regular comedy. It provides those laughs, and it would work as that. It works just as a high school movie, but it has all the Andersonian quirk built on top of it as well. And Jason Schwartzman that's one of those performances where he's a great actor and he always gives great performances, and he's given a ton of great performances since Rushmore. But Max Fisher was just such the perfect role for him, and he gave such a perfect performance in that role that it will never be topped. Outside In. This was a really, I was talking about how the best Netflix originals are the smaller movies they acquire from indie filmmakers, not the huge tentpoles they try and make for themselves. This is a perfect example. Outside In. It's about Jay Duplass plays a guy who has been in prison since he was 18. He's been, really young, and he's been in for 20 years. He's just gotten out, and you see him kind of readjusting to civilian life and trying to find a job and trying to make friends and all this stuff that he has no idea how to do because he's been in prison his whole life, or his whole adult life. And Edie Falco from The Sopranos plays his old teacher, who was she started the letter writing campaign that got him released from prison, because the tragic thing is he didn't even do the crime he was convicted for. It was one of his brother's friends, and they let him take the fall, and he was in prison for 20 years for it. And so he strikes up a bit of a friendship with Edie Falco as this teacher, and he kind of starts falling for her, and he's in love with her, but she's married and she doesn't want to have an affair. But then she's like, well, I'm very unhappy in my marriage, maybe I do want to have an affair. And her daughter, played by Caitlin Dever, who's really fantastic in this, she strikes up a friendship with Jay Duplass as well. And then, but for him it's like, let's just be friends, but for her, she's kind of has romantic feelings for him that make it very complicated. It's just a really interesting movie. There's a lot going on with the characters, and you just kind of see them handle these different situations that come up. It's really great. Flaming Star. I was listening to Quentin Tarantino on the Peter Bogdanovich podcast. I think it's called One Handshake Away. That's amazing, by the way. It's Peter Bogdanovich started it before he died, and it's since been finished by Guillermo del Toro. And every episode he would bring in one of the best directors working today to discuss one of the best directors of yesteryear, and intercut with interviews between Peter Bogdanovich and that director from 50 years ago. So he'll have interviews with Tarantino and with Greta Gerwig and with Guillermo del Toro, spliced in with interviews with Hitchcock and fucking Don Siegel. Don Siegel was the one on the Tarantino episode, and they were talking about Flaming Star, which was a western he'd made in, I think, the 50s, with Elvis Presley as the star. And they were talking about it because Elvis is considered to be Elvis's best performance. Which is Elvis's reputation as an actor is that he was known for being in crappy movies, and he was in a lot of crappy movies. I think at the behest of Colonel Tom, but he wasn't necessarily a bad actor. I mean, he wanted to be Marlon Brando. He wasn't on Marlon Brando level, but he was good, and he was great in this. It's the kind of casting you couldn't get away with today, where he plays a half white, half Native American cowboy. But it's an interesting story because he's caught between, this feud that's going on between some white characters and some Native American characters, and he can't really take a side because he's both. I thought it was really great. I mean, there's so many, because they were making Western movies back then, like they make superhero movies today. So many of them, like the superhero films today, so many of them turn out really bland and mediocre and boring. But this Flaming Star, this was one of the exceptions. This was a really interesting film, really interesting story. And Elvis's performance was great. The one I love. This was some trippy shit. This was really fucking bizarre. Where Mark Duplass and Elizabeth Moss play this couple who are having some issues, and their therapist, played by Ted Danson, recommends, go away, go on a holiday together and reconnect. And so they rent this house in the middle of nowhere, they go and drive to it. And then they start having experiences with each other, but it's not with, like, Elizabeth Moss comes in and saying to Mark Duplass, like, oh, that was great sex we just had. And he's like, we didn't just have sex. Or Mark Duplass wakes up and Elizabeth Moss is cooking breakfast, saying like, hey, have some bacon. He's like, wait, you hate when I eat bacon. And they start to realize that in this house, there's like clones of them, or like, doppelgangers with their same names, acting like they're them. And as the movie goes on, it does sort of explain why. But I just thought that as an abstract premise, that was a really interesting way to explore a relationship and the dynamics in a relationship, to have two other ones to bounce off. It was really fascinating stuff. The way it all wraps up and the way it's all explained isn't like 100% satisfying, but generally it was really a fascinating movie. Taxi Driver. I rewatched Taxi Driver because I was doing the Dummies Guide, and that's such a great fucking movie. I mean, that's not a hot take. That's nothing new, but it really deserves its reputation as one of the greatest films ever made. Because you go back and watch Taxi Driver, and it really is as profound and thought-provoking and mesmerizing as it is to go back and watch 8.5, or to go back and watch, I don't know, Breathless, something that changed the game. Roadhouse 89. Watched the original Roadhouse. Rewatched the original Roadhouse, which I hadn't seen since I was a kid, before the remake came out, because I wanted to refresh myself, on what it is they're adapting. And it really, the original has, the thing that makes the original work so well is something that the remake couldn't have, which is Patrick Swayze. If it wasn't Swayze playing Dalton, if it was Jean-Claude Van Damme or someone, Steven Seagal, that would be the biggest piece of shit movie ever made. But because it's Swayze, it's fucking great. He has this, and he did it in Point Break and in Dirty Dancing and in a ton of his movies, and Red Dawn to an extent as well, where he takes this movie that could be cheesy crap and makes it something weirdly profound, because he just has this presence and this star power and this charisma and this commitment that takes something that could be shit and makes it great, spins it into gold. Lawrence of Arabia. Finally got around to watching Lawrence of Arabia. Never seen it because it's 4 fucking hours long. And I finally sat down one day and said, you know what, I'm going to watch Lawrence of Arabia start to finish. I'm not going to move until it's over. And you know what? The cinematography is breathtaking. Cinematography is amazing. Courtesy of Freddie Young, who I think did a ton of David Lean's films. And the music by Maurice Jarre. I don't know how you pronounce it. Jarre. Is also breathtaking and is really, really cinematic and one of the greatest scores ever composed. And for the most part, the movie can coast by on that, on incredible images with incredible music in the backing of it. But the actual story I found to be so boring and so long-winded, and it's worth watching for that cinematography and that score, but the story, I cannot say the same with the story. And there's great actors in it, Peter O'Toole and Alec Guinness and Omar Sharif and Anthony Quinn, Claude Rains. Some of the greatest actors of all time are in this cast, and even they can't save it from being interminably boring. But you know what? It probably is a story that hits on a deeper level that I completely missed, so it might be a great movie after all. Reservation Dogs. I'd heard so many great things about the show, so it was so widely acclaimed, and I'd never watched it when it was on, but it was on Disney Plus, and so I binge watched the whole thing. It's great. It's really, really funny and really touching, and it weaves in and out of funny and heartbreaking really, really effectively. The cast is incredible. It's got this huge sprawling ensemble, and there are some episodes will focus on like a side character and have none of the main characters. And I often find when TV shows do that, it drags it down, because it's like, I don't care about this side character, I just want to get back to the main characters. But in this case, it's the characters are all fascinating, and it's really to take a side character who you haven't seen that much and give them the spotlight and make them the lead character for an episode. You get to know so much more about them. You get to see so much more of their story. Some of those episodes work perfectly as a standalone story. You don't have to even know the rest of the series to appreciate this sort of little half-hour story. There was this one episode, I think in season 2, where this character Cheese is sent to this house for like delinquent kids who have committed crimes and supposed to rehabilitate them. And the whole house is run by Mark Maron, playing this like sort of like he comes off as a very cynical, curmudgeonly guy who would rather be anywhere else. But then as the episode goes on, you start to realize he does really care about these kids, and he does want to do what he can to give them a bright future. There was one in season 3 where the character Elora meets her dad, who she's never met before. He's played by Ethan Hawke, and he has like a new family. And at first she's kind of trepidatious about getting to know him and hanging out with him and meeting his kids, but eventually she just embraces it and meets them, and so beautiful. It was a really beautiful series. It's really funny as a sitcom, but it's also like moving and touching as a drama too. Hairspray, the John Waters original. I've seen the remake with Zac Efron and with John Travolta as Tracy's mom. But I'd never seen the original, but that came on, I think, Amazon Prime. And it's great. I mean, I've loved every John Waters film I've seen. And, you know, I love his sort of uniquely broad, but also really dark kind of style of satire. And Hairspray is like a fun, nostalgic comedy about dancing, but it's also about society's prejudices and about breaking down those prejudices. It's really great. Pieces of a Woman. This was came out a few years ago. I think Vanessa Kirby was Oscar nominated for it. Shia LaBeouf plays her husband. And the opening of the movie, the opening sort of half an hour, is the birth. She's pregnant at the start of the movie, and the first sort of half an hour of it is the birth, where they call their doula, I think it's a doula or a midwife or whoever they need to call, to come in, and they're busy, so they send someone else. And then there's all sorts of complications with the birth, and it's all done in one long 30-minute take, which was really incredible and really puts you right in the moment. And it's for 30 minutes they're fighting like hell to make sure this baby gets out and is healthy and okay. And it couldn't be more devastating, because the baby actually comes out and is healthy for a second, and then suddenly the heart rate plummets and the baby passes away. And then the rest of the movie is Vanessa Kirby and Shia LaBeouf kind of dealing with the grief, and also the court proceedings that follow as they're trying to sue the doula who did this and blame her. And then, as it went on, and it's them dealing with the grief, and it's, they both have affairs, and all that stuff felt very contrived and not very realistic as a means of processing grief. I didn't really buy it. It was never as great as that first half an hour. That first half an hour was incredible. If that was a short film, that would be a masterpiece. But it's got 90 minutes of melodrama tagged on at the end. But that opening long take is fucking mind-blowing. I recommend go on Netflix, turn on Pieces of a Woman, watch that first half an hour, have your mind blown, cry your eyes out, and then fucking turn it off and do something else with the other 90 minutes. Dirty Grandpa. Against my better judgment, I revisited this film because I'm doing a video about it, about how it's unequivocally the worst fucking movie I've ever seen. And watching it again, I still stand by that statement. Because it was something I watched, years ago when it came out, and I thought, that's horrendously awful. The worst movie I've ever seen. I'm never going to watch it again. And for years, whenever people ask, what's the worst film you've ever seen, that's the one that came up. And I wanted to do a video about the worst film I've ever seen. And I wanted to rewatch it, first of all, to make notes, and also to make sure, is it the worst movie I've ever seen? Will I reevaluate it now? And it's an ugly, offensive, hideous movie. And it's, I could ramble on for an hour right now about how shit it is and bring up all the worst parts, but I'm going to do that in the video, so I won't spoil it, but it's awful. Made. This was Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau's follow-up to Swingers. They did another, buddy comedy. This time, there are a couple of guys trying to break into the mafia. So it's not quite as grounded or as realistic or as relatable as Swingers. But I really enjoy their back and forth. I think they're a great pair. And so, Made was worth watching just for that. And it's, it's not as great as Swingers, but it's just as much, like in Swingers, the heart of the movie is these two guys' friendship. And this time there's life or death stakes, and there's opportunities where they can actually put their lives on the line for each other. That was really great. Seinfeld. Been rewatching Seinfeld from the beginning, and it's such a great fucking show. It takes a little while to really find its feet, where season 1 and 2 is a little bit slow, but even in those seasons, you can see them building towards brilliance. And then they get to episodes like the Chinese restaurant and the one where they're looking for the car in the big car park and they can't find it. And that's when it starts to become like the greatest sitcom of all time. And then it kind of just maintains that level for the rest of the show. It gets a bit cartoonish and a bit silly after Larry David leaves and Jerry Seinfeld took over as sole showrunner. But even that stuff's really funny. And there's some really great episodes in those last couple of seasons. The Bizarro Jerry episode is one of the most out there surreal episodes, and one of my absolute favorites. And the one with the comeback where George, the ocean cold, they're running out of shrimp, and he's flying across the country just to have this comeback. And the Harold Pinter betrayal one, where it's all told backwards, it's all told in reverse chronology. That was all in the last seasons, and those were great. Those are some of the greatest sitcom episodes of all time. It's a great fucking show. And I must have seen every episode of Seinfeld 100 times now, and it's just never gets old. I'm watching it now, and it's like I'm watching it for the first time again. It's so funny. What's love got to do with it? This was, a biopic of Tina Turner, specifically through the lens of her relationship with Ike Turner. And they're played fantastically by Angela Bassett and Lawrence Fishburne. They're both incredible in the movie. With Angela Bassett, she's playing Tina Turner, this icon, as a vulnerable human being, which is really brilliant. And Lawrence Fishburne starts out as his usual charismatic self, and you see why Tina fell for Ike in the first place. And then, as he starts to become abusive and violent, he really leans into that and makes him really hateable and reprehensible. And you're like yelling at the screen for Tina to get the fuck out of there and get away from this guy. And that was really powerful. And it's, there's so much screen time dedicated to Ike's abuse that it kind of sometimes plays like as trauma porn. But the actors play it so well and so effectively and so authentically and real. And, it's really not an easy watch. It's really uncomfortable to watch. But, in a powerful way, in an emotionally hard-hitting way. And it's really inspiring when she finally leaves Ike and she breaks out on her own, and she no longer has any of the safeguards she's had throughout her career. She becomes more successful than ever on her own. That's really moving. Crazy Rich Asians. I didn't watch this when it came out, but it was a huge hit and really well received. And so I'd always planned to get around to watching it. And just this month I bought the DVD, and it's great. It's like a classic crowd-pleasing rom-com with lots of eccentric supporting characters. The emotional stuff hits emotionally, but just it's overall, it's just a really funny movie. Really great ensemble cast, huge cast with some of the funniest people in the world. So Awkwafina and Ken Jeong and Michelle Yeoh. I hated Michelle Yeoh in this because it was a great performance, because she plays the elitist, snobby mother-in-law, and she plays it so well that this actor who you've loved in a million other things, suddenly you're like, fuck you, Michelle. And that's great acting. Derry Girls, I rewatched from beginning to end. I think it's been about a year since I watched that for the first time. And that's such a funny show, such a well-written show where, the storylines dovetail in and out of each other, and every episode builds to this hilariously ironic punchline where everything comes crashing down. And the cast is amazing. It's another great cast where everyone's your favorite character because there are no bad characters. And it's got, I know nothing of the Troubles, so it's interesting to see it in the backdrop of this show, all these different things that I had no idea about. And it's really touching and very moving, and it's really funny, and there's a lot of laughs, and you're never too far away from a laugh. But there's also some dramatic turns, and some of them heartwarming and some of them heartbreaking, and the way that Lisa McGee, the writer, the way she weaves in and out of those two things, while also making it really funny and making it work as a sitcom, to then also bake in this really dramatic stuff that kind of sneaks up on you is really brilliant, really brilliantly done. Crashing. I spoke about Crashing a few months ago, the Pete Holmes show, and I spoke about how it's interesting to see a show about a comedian that in the show he's not yet a successful comedian, and so he's barking on street corners, he's giving out flyers and things just to get 5 minutes of stage time in the middle of the night, and that's an interesting peek behind the curtain at this huge long journey between like complete unknown and mega successful comedian, that there's so much shit you have to go through on the way. But what I find, I've gone back and rewatched it a couple of times now, and what I find the most compelling, as much as I love all the stuff about the stand-up world, is the relationships. There's like 2 relationships specifically that he gets into. One in season 2, I think it is, with another comedian named Ali, who I think is also played by a comedian who had actually had a relationship with Pete Holmes, so that's probably all taken from reality. And then after they break up, he gets together with this woman called Kat, who initially seems to be this perfect woman, and he's wildly in love with her. And then she starts to show her true colors, and she's actually this really terrifying, manipulative, overbearing person, and kind of sociopathic, it seems. And it's just really interesting to watch Pete get way in over his head with this woman. And that's another one, like Reservation Dogs, where there's a couple of episodes that are just like standalone masterpieces in their own right, and you could watch just that episode and get invested in that story. There's one where Pete and Ali and the manager of the Boston Comedy Club, where Pete kind of gets his start in the show, are all on the road together, and they have all these problems with each other, all these problems with the management of the club, and it's just really interesting to watch, and it's just such a great show. Another one that's really funny and also really touching at parts and takes dramatic turns that really work and really land. Just really, really great TV. Gigli. I finished this month on what is generally considered to be one of the worst movies ever made. And I honestly, it's a bad movie, but it's not quite as bad as it's made out to be. And I would love to see the movie that Martin Brest, the writer-director, I want to see the movie he originally wanted to make, because I'm a huge fan of his. Beverly Hills Cop and Midnight Run are two of like my all-time favorites. And, he can make these great action comedies, like dark comedies set in the crime world. And that's kind of what he set out to do with Gigli. But because Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez, they met while they were making it on the set, and they started seeing each other, and they became like, Bennifer became like the biggest thing in the world, and it was on all the tabloid papers, and people were obsessed with this relationship. So the studio decided, now that their relationship has given this movie free publicity, rather than just let the movie be what it was supposed to be in the script that Martin Brest wrote and was directing, the studio said, hey, let's make them, let's make this a sappy Hollywood love story. And, Martin Brest originally just wanted to make like a little dark crime comedy. And I would have loved to see that, because the elements of that are here. And it's a great cast. I mean, I love Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez as actors. I think they're great actors. But Al Pacino is in it, and Christopher Walken is in it. But, the studio interfered. They fucked it all up. And what we're left with is this very generic, mediocre romance piled on top of what could have been a really interesting little gangster story. So I want to see the Martin Brest cut of Gigli. Release the Brest cut. # release the Brest cut. Alright, well there you have everything I can remember watching in March after my fucking phone broke and I lost the list. But what have you all been watching? If you have some recommendations, you have some films or TV shows you've been watching that were great, put them in the comments and I'll watch them. And I'll speak to you in April. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you liked the video. Remember to like and subscribe and click on the little bell. And also seize the day and call your mom and be kind to yourself.